Good morning, members. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Nathan Cooper. I'm the MLA for the outstanding constituency of Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills, and the chair of this committee. I would now like to ask members and those joining us at the committee table to introduce themselves for the record. I will call on members joining the meeting remotely to introduce themselves after we have met those sitting at the table. I would also like to note for the record the following substitutions: Mr. Weeb for Mr. Yao, Honorable Mr. Hunter for Mr. Singh. Mr. Roth.
Good morning, Aaron Roth, Committee Clerk.
Shane Getson, MLA for Lexington and Parkland, but known as God's Country.
Garth Rosal, MLA for Vermilion Lake, Mr. Wainwright.
Martin Long, the MLA for West Yellowhead.
Terry Langley, Sergeant at Arms.
Andrew Cody, Speaker's Office.
Leanne Bell, Speaker's Office.
Good morning, all. Christina Gray, MLA for Edmonton Millwoods.
Darren Jory, Legislative Assembly Office and Senior Financial Officer.
Dave Ludwig, Corporate Services.
Good morning, Trafton Koenig, Law Clerk.
Good morning, Shannon Dean, Clerk.
Mr. Weeb.
Ron Weeb, MLA for Grand Prairie Wapiti.
Dr. Metz.
Luann Metz, MLA for Calgary Varsity.
Mr. Sabir.
Han Saber, MLA Calgary Bolor McCall.
Mr. Hunter.
Grant Hunter, MLA for Tabor Warner.
Mr. Egan.
Good morning, I'm Dave Egan, MLA for Edmonton Northwest.
Thank you all. Before we turn to the business at hand, a few operational items. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio, video stream, and transcript of the meeting can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Those participating remotely are encouraged to please turn on your camera while speaking and mute your microphone when not speaking. Members participating virtually who wish to be placed on the speakers list are asked to email or send a message in the group chat to the committee clerk, and members in the room, please signal by raising your hand. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. With that, brings us to item number 2, the approval of the agenda. Are there any proposed additions or revisions to today's meeting?
No, just one item. Mr. Chair, so I'd like to bring up another item on caucus, on other business for caucus expenditures, the only other item.
That's fine, we can do that under other business.
Okay.
Seeing and hearing no other changes, I'd like to call the question, unless Ms. Gray, that was an indication that you had a comment. Okay. All those in favor of approving the agenda as distributed, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. On the phones, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say no. Motion is carried and so ordered. Brings us to item number 3, the approval of meeting minutes. Are there any amendments to the minutes from our last committee meeting, November 26th, 2024? If not, would a member move the approval of the minutes? Member Roswell. Is there any discussion or amendments that need to be made? Seeing and hearing none. All in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. On the phone, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say no. Motion is carried and so ordered. Honorable members, it brings us to item number 4, review of members' compensation, benefits, and allowances. Item A, report of the Members' Compensation, Benefits, and Allowance Review Subcommittee. Honorable members, the Members' Compensation, Benefits, and Allowance Review Subcommittee has provided the committee with its final report. In fulfillment of its mandate, the subcommittee has reviewed the independent consultant report on members' compensation, benefits, and allowances and has made recommendations for consideration by this committee. I will note for the record that the report of the independent consultant has been attached to the subcommittee's report at the subcommittee's discretion. At this time, I'd like to entertain any comments, questions, or motions in relation to the report. And if I may be so bold, this isn't specific to any deliberation around the recommendations of the report, but that we are accepting the report from the subcommittee to MSC, that a potential motion might read something as follows: a member receive the final report of the members' compensation benefit and allowance review subcommittee, direct the Legislative Assembly office to post the report referred to in A to the committee's public website, and C, direct the chair to table the report referred to in A for the record of the Legislative Assembly when the Legislative Assembly resumes sitting. Is there any discussion on a motion, or would someone be prepared to move that motion? Member Getson, thank you. The motion is now on the screen for the benefit of the members. Provide a moment, Ms. Gray.
Just a comment to clarify. So the report will include the report from the subcommittee, an appendix that is the consultant's independent report, and also the minority dissenting report that the official opposition submitted. Is that correct?
That's correct. The minority report that the official opposition submitted, or members of the official opposition on this committee submitted, is included in the final report from the subcommittee that was posted to the internal committee website yesterday at approximately 4 p.m. And that is the report that will be in its entirety provided on the external committee website and then tabled in the assembly. Are there any other questions with respect to the motion before the committee? If not, I'm prepared to call the question. On the motion as proposed by Member Getson, all those in favor in the room, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Joining us remotely, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say no. Motion is carried and so ordered. Item B of item number 4 is deliberations. Honorable members, as the committee has now received the subcommittee's final report in relation to members' compensation, benefits, and allowances, we are now at a point where members can make comments and offer recommendations for the committee's consideration in relation to the review. I would note that the subcommittee's report provided 3 recommendations to the committee. And perhaps we might begin discussion on those 3 recommendations. Recommendation 1 is a recommendation on the members' indemnity allowance. And I'd like to open the floor to any comments or motions in relation to recommendation 1 that addresses adjustments to the members' indemnity allowance. Mr. Getson.
Yeah, so appreciate that, Mr. Chair. So I believe we submitted some items that were listed before for the table's consideration. So I would like to have the first recommendation that is going to be to approve the recommendation of the final report, the members' compensation benefits allowance, and review the subcommittee respect the adjustment of the members at MA allowance, and direct the legislative offices to prepare a draft amending order to the members' allowance in accordance with Clause A. The second item that I have for that is to approve the recommendation for the final report's members' compensation, benefits, and allowance. Review the subcommittee with respect to providing a transition allowance to members. Oh, apologize.
Yeah, no problem. Each of these recommendations need to be dealt with in isolation. And so, as you know, the subcommittee made 3 recommendations. You just raised recommendation number 1 with respect to the indemnity allowance for members. The committee clerk has put the recommendation on the screen, as well as your proposed motion, which is to approve the recommendation in the final report of the members' Compensation Benefit and Allowance Review Subcommittee with respect to the adjustment of members' indemnity allowance, and 2, direct the Legislative Assembly Office to prepare the draft amendment orders to the members' allowances. But for the benefits of the committee, the recommendation is on the screen. No, it's okay. We're just going to try to expand it a little bit. And with respect to item B, which of Mr. Getson's motion, direct the Legislative Assembly Office to prepare a draft amending order for the member services allowance. It will take the Legislative Assembly Office some period of time, and we will approve the actual order based on the recommendations here at the committee today. And I would anticipate in early February, maybe end of February, when we're all back together, that we would then approve the orders that are the direction from what we provide them today. So that is the second part of that motion, but I don't have comments on the first half of the motion if members of the committee would like to make comments.
I could first put the explanation, I guess, since I kind of jumped ahead a little bit with the sense of expediency. So the proposed change of this would mean the member salaries would be adjusted annually based on a percentage increase or decrease in the weighted average percentage of change in wage settlements for the public sector in Alberta, which is published by the Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Trade and is updated essentially every month. The adjustments would be retroactive for 2025 and would be implemented on April 1st, 2025. And yes, that is April Fool's Day. That always cracks me up when we do adjustments on April Fool's Day, but it is what it is. Each fiscal year that would be adjusted on April 1st based on the most up-to-date published metric. The metric can be found under the bargaining update site. So again, it has the essence for transparency. It's tied to other bargaining agreements, and it's adjusted on an annual basis automatically.
Are there other questions, comments with respect to Mr. Getson's motion on the recommendation? Ms. Gray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So to be clear, the motion that is before this committee is to give MLAs a salary increase annually, and for this year's increase to be retroactive to January 1. In the context of an ongoing and unprecedented affordability crisis that is hitting Albertans in every corner, I have to note that the official opposition did not support this at subcommittee. We have submitted a minority report dissenting, and I don't support the motion that Member Getson has put forward, because I think every MLA has heard from constituents how much harder it is to get by now than it was 6 years ago. We've seen the slowest wage growth, we've seen highest unemployment, costs rising everywhere, and today, education support workers are on the strike line in Fort McMurray, a group of workers who haven't seen an increase in a decade, who on average make $34,000 a year, and who are working in deteriorating conditions because of the chronic underfunding in our education system, with over 150 plus unfilled positions any given day. So I think the context of what's happening in Alberta is really important when we talk about MLAs and our salaries and should we be getting increases. And I really think it's not appropriate for us to be granting ourselves higher pay and benefits at a time when Albertans are struggling through cost of living challenges. As a final note, I will just say minimum wage is the lowest in the country here in Alberta and hasn't been increased since the UCP government was formed. $15 an hour, $13 an hour for youth. In all of these contexts, that's the reason why the official opposition submitted a dissenting minority report, and I cannot support this. I also think that the majority of Albertans would not support MLA increases at this time. Those are my opening comments, Mr. Speaker.
Sure, I'll let Member Getson follow up to those remarks, and then we'll go to Mr. Sabir, who has raised his hand in the virtual room.
Perfect. I appreciate it. And Member Gray, we obviously take the affordability crisis very serious as well. But just for a little edification for those that are following along at home as well. So in 2009, the MLA wages were frozen. That's what our report had told us by the third party. In 2016, the MLAs rightfully took a 5% wage rollback at that period in time. 2019, where I was privileged for the first time to serve as a member, we voted unanimously for another 5% wage rollback at that time. And at that point, it was under the auspices of balancing the budget, and we managed to do that 3 times in a row. Notwithstanding other collective bargaining agreements, those things, everyone is absolutely feeling a crunch on that. And to understand where, if I was looking outward, and if I pulled up Glassdoor as an example for the wages that we receive as MLAs, I could be an associate criminal lawyer, I could be a Red Seal journeyman electrician, I could be a hearing aid specialist, I could be a Super B Class 1 operator. Those are the type of wage brackets that we're talking about here. So folks at home should know that it's not comparable to a federal item, you know, when you start looking at comparators for there. And again, we're in absolute agreement with you of the affordability crisis and those items, and that's what we're working on as administration. But I think most people would understand of having your wage frozen for a number of years, you know, going almost 10 years, and having an additional 5%, 10% at this point taken back, that this is simply something that's reasonable. It's a reasonable bracket based on other collective bargaining, and making sure that it's taken care of accordingly. For the position of this office, again, we put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and I know your members do as well. And this would account for approximately 2.2% increase, given that we've already had those other items. I think the record should clearly indicate that as well. Thank you.
Member Sabir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Member Katzen noted frozen wages, so I will start with other frozen wages. That is minimum wage that didn't go up since UCP took office, and we have asked for that. Albertans have asked for that, and at a time when we are seeing affordability crisis, we are seeing inflation crisis, I think this seems completely out of touch what Albertans expect from their government, what Albertans deserve from their government. It's completely self-serving out of so many issues that we could have picked as legislators. MLA pay is on the top for UCP MLAs in particular, because we are not supporting this motion. There are so many other things. For instance, I hear in Northeast Calgary every day about issues facing our school system. Kids are being bused to different quadrants, and government of Alberta is funding education at the lowest in Canada. And now recommendation here from majority of the committee, UCP member majority of the committee, is that MLA pay should go up. I don't think that I can get behind that.
Dr. Metz has indicated she would like to provide some comments. Followed by Member Egan, please.
Thank you very much. I can't support this at a time when we've got this government changing fees, cutting fees to different groups as well. I agree with all of the comments of my colleagues, Christina Gray, or yes, we can use names here, Christina Gray and Irfan Sabir, and pointing out that due to affordability, apparently the fees for things like childhood and senior eye exams, where a follow-up is required, are being cut. Pharmacists have seen cuts, and yet we're going to be increasing wages for MLAs. This doesn't sit right. We know there's an affordability crisis. The government can see that by trying to increase their own wages, but we are not recognizing that this hits all Albertans, and it is Albertans that are going to be paying for this.
Member Egan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too have serious concerns about this motion to increase MLA's salaries in the midst of probably what's the worst affordability crisis that Albertans have seen in several generations. I know as Shadow Minister of Advanced Education, for example, that an unprecedented amount of money has been taken out of our colleges, universities, and polytechnics not investing in the future of young people in particular, in our workforce. And, we had an opportunity in the last legislative session to address some of these affordability issues, but what this government chose to do instead was to pick fights with transgendered people, to talk about sex ed and not deal with affordability. And yet here we are at first opportunity to increase wages for MLAs, and this UCP caucus is all about increasing their own wages. And so the responsibility of a government, number one, first and foremost, is to ensure the safety, the security, and the affordability of all persons that live in the jurisdiction. And Albertans are not seeing that from this UCP government, but what they are seeing is self-serving increases to MLA wages.
Thank you, Member Egan. Are there others wishing to? Member Gray.
Thank you very much. Just in reflecting on this change, I think there's another point that I need to make, and that is that the motion put before the committee is one that provides annual increases. And we saw when the temporary accommodation allowance was updated last November, that increase to MLAs was also given CPI indexing, so inflation proofing. And so there's a pattern here of the government making sure that their entitlements and benefits are inflation proofed and will continue to go up at a time that we've also seen the UCP government de-index critical supports for people on AISH, for seniors benefits. And we just finished debating legislation just this past fall around de-indexing and the impact that that has. And I just need to point out that while de-indexing is on the table and has been used against the most vulnerable, here MLA wages will go up every year, no matter, well, depending on what it's tied to is, but most likely will go up every year. I've had the chance to look at the indicator that has been chosen. It looks like it's gone up every year for the past many years. So I expect that's likely to continue, but certainly it's tied there. I think we are seeing a pattern of behavior that serves UCP members and their interests. And I think Member Sabir said it very well, that this is out of touch and not supported by the Alberta public.
Are there others? Seeing none, I am prepared to call the question. Presupposing, I assume that you're going to want a recorded division? Yes. Okay. Let's move immediately to a recorded division. We have to? Okay. Honorable members, on the motion as proposed by Member Getson, all those in favor here in the room, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. Joining us remotely, and if you can all turn your cameras on for this vote and then for the subsequent division. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say no.
Aye.
No.
No.
Member Sabir?
No.
Can you also turn your camera on, Member Sabir, for the division?
Yes. Sorry, I was trying to.
That's okay.
click the screen.
A recorded
I'll
vote has been requested by Member Gray. I will call each member here at the table to raise their hand here in the room. If you're in favor, please raise your hand. Member Getson, Member Roswell, and Member Long. If you are opposed, please raise your hand. Member Gray. I will call each member by name. Please indicate for or against. Member Wiebe.
Aye.
Member Hunter.
For.
Member Sabir.
Against.
Member Metz.
Against.
Member Egan.
Against.
That motion is Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, total for the motion, 5, total against 4.
Motion is carried and so ordered. Honorable members, it brings us to recommendation number 2. That was specific to a recommendation with respect to a transition allowance. The subcommittee did make a recommendation, and I believe that recommendation will be coming to the screen momentarily. But is there anyone that would like to speak to this recommendation number 2? Member Getson.
Sure. Well, we're off to a good start, Mr. Speaker. So the approved recommendation, I think it'll be up on the screen here, so I'll just go into the explanation of it. So the proposed changes for eligible members would be now entitled to a transition allowance once a month per year of service up to a maximum of 6 months. This change recognizes that MLAs don't qualify for employment benefits, insurance, et cetera, or any of the other items that come with it. So currently, right now, there's a hard stop for years of service. There is no transition allowance. It also recognizes that the Conflict of Interest Act prevents former ministers from working for several months after leaving public office. So again, they are not allowed to earn after they leave office. The proposed transition allowance would include eligible members from the 31st legislature. The formula would grant 1 month per pay per year up to a maximum of 6 months. And the payment and allowance would be made on a monthly basis. And again, the mechanisms that we're looking at here would be for members who were from the 30th sitting of the legislature and who potentially are in the 31st sitting of the legislature to be part of this. So it would catch that up. There was a couple troubling, I guess, most recent notes in some of them in the media out there. Former members serving in Ontario, as an example, was found in a homeless shelter. Not saying that this is, a cry for help by any means, but there are some hardships out there faced by your elected officials, believe it or not, while transitioning out. Other jurisdictions have this. The report recommendation that came from us in the third party was upwards to 12 months, and we couldn't find our way to see that was warranted, but we did see that there was a number of issues and challenges faced here by MLAs that would warrant the 6 months. Members of the committee have taken a measured approach, guided by the recommendations and best practices of other comparable jurisdictions. So we looked outwards across the country for that. And Alberta remains an outlier in MLA benefits, where we're the only province that are not eligible for a pension. And this would not change. We are not making any recommendations for a pension for members or anything else. The transition allowance is a short-term assistance to former members who are re-entering private life and are common in most Canadian jurisdictions. MLAs in Saskatchewan and Manitoba are eligible to receive a transition allowance of up to 12 months, as that other external report had advised us, while members in BC are eligible up to 15 months. So again, just for the record, we would be proposing something that would allow for a max at 6 months, and the calculation is based on year service multiplied by 1 month over a monthly basis. So with that, I would open it up to other comments, Chair.
Okay, so for clarity's sake, you're speaking directly to the recommendation that the subcommittee provided. And do you have a motion, or do you want, we can have some discussion around the recommendation, and then perhaps you can move a motion to accept that or otherwise?
Yeah, that would be fine. We'll open up for discussion and then move on.
That's fine. We can have some discussion about the recommendation. My sense is that Member Gray may have some feelings about it.
I do, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much. But first I want to just ask a clarifying question. So we're not talking about the motion yet, but Member Getson, I heard you refer to the 30th legislature. Can you clarify your intent there?
Correct. So the intent would be for those that were elected back to back. So starting the start for this would be the 30th sitting of the legislature for those members who also are sitting in the 31st sitting of the legislature. So as an example, if I use myself as an example to make it very clear and abundant, if my calculation, if I ran on the 30th, which I did and successfully served for 4 years there, and ran again for the 31st sitting and was successful there, if I were to not run again, be hit by a bus, not be elected subsequently in the 32nd sitting of the legislature, then I would be, as an example, open up to that calculation of 1 month of service per year of years served for that transition allowance up to a max of 6 months. Hopefully that helps.
So I'll go back to Member Gray, and then I have Member Sabir on the list, who will be next to speak after Member Gray.
Thank you very much. So we are talking about what is often referred to as a golden parachute, executive compensation, people getting a financial package at the end of their term. And to be very clear, the recommendation that we received in the report by the independent consultant who reviewed member compensation benefits and allowances did recommend that it not recognize member service prior to May 29th, 2023. So what the government we're currently discussing, there's no motion, is a change and an extension of what was recommended in this document. Similar to what we just talked about with salaries, I think that there has been a lot of public discussion about Alberta MLAs and the compensation that they receive as they depart office. And I'm very concerned that constituents are not going to be supportive of this. This was another item in our dissenting minority report that the official opposition said we would not support. And I am concerned, again, given the context, the affordability crisis that is happening, and the challenges that my constituents and all Albertans are facing, that we are talking about not just this 6-month payment at the end of service to a maximum of that 6 months, but extending it backwards even. I'll leave my comments there for now.
Member Sabir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Member Gray noted, my colleague noted, that this recommendation is different from what was contained in the independent consultant report. And Member Getson has used her service as example to clarify this. I think our disagreement is again based on the same principle. Some of the examples used were that some former member in Ontario was in a homeless shelter. I represent a kind of riding that is away from downtown. It's in the corner of Calgary. And never before I have seen homeless tents in this area. And now if you drive up McKnight Boulevard, that's a little bit off from my riding, we can see those tents there. If you drive in some parking lot, superstore parking lot, you will see those tents there. So homelessness has risen sharply in last few years. We have numbers from Edmonton, we have numbers from Calgary and elsewhere. So I think using that example to, again, make a self-serving change to protect your own personal interest as politician, that's not something we can get behind. If we are really concerned about homelessness, I think every Albertan deserves to have a place called home. And there are so many Albertans who don't have that as we speak now. So I don't think that I can get behind this.
Dr. Metz has indicated she would like to speak to the recommendation.
Thank you. I cannot support this recommendation. This is not something that the average Albertan has when they leave their job or are terminated from their job. And while, of course, it's always a challenge as to how a person is going to move on and find a new position when they finish one job or another, we are electing or should be electing very skilled people who I believe the length of this gets to be a little bit out of keeping with what other Albertans have to live with. And I do think that we should be considering that this is even longer than the consultant's report. So I do not support this.
Are there others? Member Gray?
Thank you very much. Because of the potential change, my quick question to the LAO team that is here is, would you be able to, I'm trying to do the math, tell us how much the adjustment to include the 30th legislature will cost in the budget, given every MLA will eventually retire or be retired?
So MLA Gray, yes, we can do that math. We've since the conversation came up here, been contemplating how to do the math. We would have to do some research to get the appropriate count of members who are current members, but who had sitting in the 30th legislature in order to do that math, but the math can be done, yes.
Okay. So unfortunately, we'll have to make the decision here, assuming a motion is forthcoming, without knowing the cost to taxpayers and the LAO budget.
Mr. Getson.
Yeah, and just to be clear too, for all those that are running spreadsheets off to the side, it hasn't changed in the contemplation. It'd only be the MLA base salary. So in the scenario where an MLA is also, as an enhanced portfolio, is being a minister, it would not be based on the ministerial or any other upticks. And myself as Chief Government Whip, for the additional duties and delegations and items that I have to deal with in that area, that arena, there is a monicum of compensation for that as well. That would not be included. So again, it's only on base salaries of the MLA for if you need to run any numbers over there.
I wondered if Member Getson, if it is your intention to move a motion to contemplate those changes from the report, if you might be prepared to do that.
I would absolutely love to do that. And is it on the screen now?
I think it's just been provided.
Okay.
That's the recommendation. A motion would be slightly different to contemplate your recommendations. I believe it's on the screen now.
And Chair, just to confirm, do you want me to read it into the
Yeah,
record?
you know what, in this case, I think it might be worthwhile reading into the record because it's a bit of a change. Go
Sure.
ahead.
So we'll see if my new glasses are working here. Jumping back and forth, bifocals. Approve the recommendation of final report members' compensation and benefits allowance review of the subcommittee with respect to the providing a transition allowance to a member serving on or after May 29th, 2023, with the modifications to the formula for determining the amount of the transition allowance to be paid to the eligible member must include any period of service that is the eligible member on or after April 16, 2019, and direct the Legislative Assembly Office to prepare a draft amending the order to the members' allowances and orders with Clause A.
For the benefit of the committee, the second section of such a motion, of course, is to allow parliamentary council to actually draft the order, and that order will be approved in a subsequent meeting. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the recommendation or the motion that's now before the committee? Member Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the motion that's on the floor, if the LAO can come back with the costing to our next meeting, whenever that may be, I would like to know what this will cost Alberta taxpayers. And I just want to be clear, I do not support this increase to MLA benefits. We've just the UCP majority on this committee have just passed an MLA salary increase that will impact this golden parachute. And given the context of the affordability crisis in our province, at a time when Albertans are struggling through cost of living challenges, I cannot support this.
Are there others on the motion or the recommendation? Seeing and hearing none, I am prepared to call the question. Oh, Member Sabir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was trying to get into the queue and you called the question, but I will be really quick. It's kind of surprising that committee is asked to pass something that has implications for taxpayers, and even nobody on the government side who are proposing this know what the cost will be. That's kind of reckless, basically, and completely out of touch with what Albertans expect from a prudent government.
Thank you, Member Sabir. I will call the question here in the room. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. Joining us remotely, please say aye.
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 Opposed, please say no.
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 That motion is carried and so ordered, and a
Recorded vote, please.
A recorded vote has been requested. Here in the room, I will ask you to raise your hand accordingly, and when we go remotely, I'll ask you to indicate in favor or against. All those in favor of the motion as proposed by Member Getson, please raise your hand. Member Getson, Member Rosewell, Member Long. Any opposed, please raise your hand. Member Gray. Joining us remotely, Member Weeb.
In favor.
Member Hunter.
In favor.
Member Sabir.
Against.
Dr. Metz.
Against.
Member Egan.
Against.
Mr. Speaker, total for the motion 5, total against 4.
Motion is carried and so ordered. Honorable members, that brings us to recommendation number 3. I would like to open the floor for any comments or motions in relation to recommendation number 3 that provides an additional $6,000 to address financial pressures related to staffing and leases in constituency offices. Member Getson.
Sure. So the rationale for this, and again, the report was extremely handy in seeing some of the costs. We obviously consulted with other MLAs as well, on our own as subcommittee members, I'm sure, just to see if some of the report findings were holding oil, as it were. And I think all of us have seen pressures both in leasing costs, the staffing pressures as well. This is meant to address some of those items. And again, it's one of the line items that form up the aggregate total of the whole constituency office. And again, to be clear, this is directly related to serving our constituents. It's making sure that they have someone there to pick up the phone when they need it. It's making sure that our staff can, we can have decent staff to be able to do that heavy lifting and that work, to deal with the ministries and represent our constituents. And obviously, you know, we're talking about affordability. We've all seen the affordability costs go up, for the example of just heating these buildings, et cetera. So we've all seen those pressures through which hopefully will be defunct soon enough, the carbon tax that the opposition supported and propped up. And we've seen those pressures increase year over year. So this is to address some of those items.
Would you like to make a recommendation, or would you be prepared to make a motion with respect to accepting the recommendation or not?
I absolutely would, unless the other member wanted to talk first. So, yeah, absolutely. So we have that recommendation number 3 for the additional $6,000 for the member's service allowance, so that the member's compensation benefits and allowance review subcommittee recommended that the constituency services order be amended to adjust the portion. Here we go. There's the motion now.
Okay, go ahead. Approve the recommendation in the final report of the members' compensation benefit and allowance review subcommittee with respect to increasing the members' allowance by $6,000 to address financial pressures related to staffing and constituency office leased costs, and direct the Legislative Assembly office to prepare a draft amending order to the constituency services order in accordance with the recommendation clause A.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Mr. Chair. So thank you.
Any questions, comments, concerns with respect to the recommendation from the subcommittee or the motion as proposed by Member Getson? Member Gray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So as noted in our dissenting minority report, this recommendation that the subcommittee made was not supported by the subcommittee members from the official opposition. The decisions and recommendations made by the UCP majority in the subcommittee across these three recommendations have no regard for the realities and the struggles of everyday Albertans. And we saw the reaction when the temporary accommodation allowance was increased at the end of last November. Certainly, I think the official opposition believes it is not appropriate for MLAs to be granting themselves higher pay and benefits at a time when Albertans are struggling. And recognizing the leasing pressures, knowing that rent has been going up, that there have been inflationary pressures, that there have been insurance pressures, utility costs. These are things that all Alberta businesses are under these pressures. All of our constituents are under these pressures. And the official opposition sees that the government is moving quickly to resolve these issues for MLAs, but we are not seeing enough action on the insurance side. As an aside, a plan to create a plan in 2 years that might reduce things, but everything's going up first. Very frustrating to see. I cannot support this motion. The official opposition does not support this motion. $6,000 additional to each MLA office at a time when the government has not been recognizing what is happening as far as affordability is concerned to businesses and constituents of our province.
Are there others? Member Egan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I concur with Member Gray's analysis. It's interesting, I was just dealing with several issues in my constituency with individuals having their rents increased and other costs, and businesses as well that literally could not keep their heads above water because of increases to rent and ancillary costs, just creating an affordability crisis, not just for individuals, but for businesses, and in particular a medical clinic that serves lots of people in my constituency, really not being able to continue providing public health care because of these costs. And so for us to swoop in and bail out constituency offices, while Albertans are suffering is just completely tone deaf and, flies in the face again what I said before, our fundamental responsibility, our first responsibility, which is to the people of Alberta and not just MLA. So I think the UCP is not listening and is tone deaf on this too, and I will not be supporting this motion.
Are there others who would like to speak to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, I am prepared to call the question. All those in favor here in the room, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. Joining us remotely in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, please say no.
No.
Motion is carried and so ordered. And a recorded division has been requested. We will conduct this division in the same manner in which we have conducted the previous two. Those in the room, please indicate if you are in favor by raising your hand. Member Getson, Member Rosewell, Member Long. Opposed, please raise your hand. Member Gray. Joining us remotely, Member Weeb.
In favor.
Member Hunter.
Aye.
Member Sabir.
Against.
Dr. Metz.
Against.
Member Egan.
Opposed.
Motion.
Mr. Speaker, total for the motion, 5, total against 4.
Motion is carried and so ordered. Honorable members, it brings us to item number 5. Oh, sorry.
May I offer additional comments on the report that is before the committee?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Because the report by the independent consultant is with these decisions now becoming public, the subcommittee recommended the salary increase for MLAs that will be annual, the new golden parachute that will be granted to MLAs going back to the 30th legislature, the $6,000 increase to constituencies that we've just passed. I did want to note that one of the things that the subcommittee reviewed was the temporary residence allowance. Now, a motion was put forward on the temporary residence allowance at the end of November. And so that's already been voted on by this committee. But given that the report is now public, I would like to make clear, just by reading the recommendation, that for the temporary living allowance, the recommendation from the consultant was, it is recommended that the committee implement a modest adjustment to the temporary allowance rate as of April 1, 2024. A rate adjustment in an amount of $205 to the existing base rate of $193 per day could be considered, which is equivalent to $2,050 per month to a maximum of $24,600 per year. This adjustment from $193 to $205 per day reflects an inflationary increase of 6%. Alternative adjustment rates reflect the following percentage increase, and then the consultant provided a 5%, 4%, or 3% option. I read this into the record because at our November meeting, the members of the government caucus put forward and supported a 14% increase, more than double what the consultant had put forward. So instead of the recommendation of 193 to 205, we actually got an increase to $350. And now that the consultant's recommendations are becoming public, given the opposition's objection to that increase at the time, I think it's just really important to note for the record that while Albertans were struggling with the cost of living, while rents were going up, not only did government MLAs give themselves a temporary accommodation allowance, residence allowance increase of 14%, but it was far beyond what an independent consultant recommended of 6%. And I think that's really important to note. It seems that at that point, the UCP MLAs broke open the piggy bank, and now they are continuing to grab every penny with salary increases, golden parachutes, more money for constituencies, and again, recommending far beyond what the independent consultant did. I will note they've essentially done that again in going beyond what the consultant recommended in extending the golden parachute backwards to the 2019 election instead of the recommended 2023 election. So as we on our agenda are considering the report, I do not have a motion because the temporary residence allowance has already been increased despite official opposition objections. But I really wanted to make the point that what the government did in November, right before Christmas, was well out of line of what the independent consultant recommended.
Are there others wishing to speak to the report or otherwise? Member Getson.
Yeah, I feel compelled now. So for the record, the compensation for those that are getting a subsistence or a living out allowance is intended to keep individuals whole. It's maxed out and it's capped at that. It doesn't mean they automatically get those items, so it's only what they claim for, and the intent of that all along is to be kept whole like every other item. The members have, and again, we need to make a little political hay while the sun shines, I guess, is what the members are doing, and that's fine. But the record should also indicate for the items and changes we're making, they're not mandatory that you have to take them. So if the members, as an example, if your MSA that's allowed for your constituency office, if you have money left over, you can return that. In my first year, I think I returned about $50,000. Then we saw COVID take place and we saw massive constraints and pushes on everything else. We needed heightened services provided to our constituents, and our budgets have been tighter and leaner. So again, I would challenge, if the opposition really wants to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, you're not compelled to take any compensation packages. You're not compelled to take them. If you really want to pony up to the bar, then it's fully within your wheelhouse to not take them and turn them back to the public if you don't need them. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks.
Are there others? Seeing and hearing none, it brings us to item number 5 on the agenda, which is the 2025-2026 Legislative Assembly budget parameters. Honorable members, as the committee has approved additional measures in relation to members' compensation, benefits, and allowances, the 2025-2026 Legislative Assembly budget parameters document that was approved on November 26, 2024, will needed to be updated accordingly. There's no requirement for a motion, but I am compelled to inform members of the committee that any decisions that the committee has undertaken today or will undertake today will be reflected in that budget parameters document, which will be circulated to members of the committee, I would anticipate, in the early parts of next week, if that seems like a reasonable timeline to my colleagues. So that is just an item for information for you and for you to be alert and aware to the changes that budget parameters document will make. And then, of course, we will have additional budget meeting in the subsequent weeks when the LAO has concluded the preparation of the 2025-26 Legislative Assembly budget, and we'll convene a meeting to approve or make changes to that at that time. Brings us, unless anyone has any questions about item number 5, seeing none, it brings us to item number 6, and at the beginning of the meeting, Member Getson indicated that he did have another item of business, and I will turn the floor over to him to speak to whatever that may be.
I do, and I thank you for that, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. I was trying to remember the room, but it's always ingrained in me. So there was another item that kind of took us a little bit by surprise. We started looking at some cross-jurisdictional analysis, and essentially where it comes down to is the calculation for what caucus receives. So the current calculation in the province is that only MLAs are counted for contributions towards caucus budgets. In other jurisdictions, they have other calculations for those who may have ministries as well. And to be clear, there's ministerial work of which an MLA is elected for their constituents, and then if so chosen to go to cabinet, they have that portfolio, so they run the government part. They're the cabinet ministers. They have a clear scope under the ministries of what's allowed for ministerial work, and then there's this part that also has to do with caucus work and also as MLAs. We find ourselves in an interesting position, whereas the MLAs for the UCP caucus, that we're in a deficit position, a drastic deficit position compared to the opposition members. And what that translates into is service that we can provide as MLAs back to our constituents, and what work we can do and services we can provide to our members for caucus work as well. So what we're proposing here, looking at different jurisdictions, the one that seemed most reasonable that had contemplated this, and I think before in the past it may not have been such a difference, because it was more one-sided, quite frankly, with the government calculations of who was in caucus and who had which side at that time. So I think right now is the first time we've seen that it's been such a balance between one official opposition and the government caucus members, being the MLAs, and we've seen, again, this deficit position. So what we're proposing is to look at a calculation based on ministers of being 50% of what an MLA contribution back to caucus would be. And what that does is it brings it up by looking at the rough numbers a little bit either on par or a little bit below what the opposition caucus members now are afforded to do caucus work. So again, we're looking at trying to fill that gap, that disparity, make sure that our constituents are obviously covered off where they need to, that caucus business can take place unhinged, and make sure that it's balanced. And this is what we believe is in the best interest of the democratic process, in the best interest of taxpayers, Albertans themselves. And I think I've caught everything there. Yes, it'd be, yeah, so that's what we'd like to be doing. So the item would be to amend the budget funding model as per Appendix A in the expenditure guidelines for Caucus Legislative Assembly effective April 1st, 2025, to include members of the Executive Council. So those would be the cabinet ministers at 50% of the amount provided for each member for the purpose of research funding, general per member funding. And to direct the Legislative Office to revise the expenditure guidelines for the Caucus of the Legislative Assembly in accordance with Clause A. I believe I've caught all the items that I mentioned.
Member Gitson, were you able to provide the wording of that motion to the committee clerk? Looks like you have, because he had it. Thank you.
Okay.
But can you just confirm that the wording that is...
What I'll do, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, I'll just read it right back in and make sure it's there. So amend the caucus budget funding model, add Appendix A of the expenditure guidelines for caucuses of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta effective April 1st, 2025, to include members of Executive Council, a rate of 50% of the amount provided for each member for the purpose of research and funding and general per member funding, and direct the Legislative Assembly Office to revise the expenditure guidelines for caucuses of the Legislative Assembly in accordance with Clause A. And again, this is not party specific. Whomever has the configuration of the next sitting of the Legislative Assembly, so the 32nd sitting as an example, would have this. So again, it's contemplating that disparity that we've seen this last go around.
Questions, comments, concerns? Member Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this proposal is outrageous. The government only signaled to the official opposition that they might be considering this 48 hours ago. And so in your opening comments, you said something else that took us by surprise, and we did a cross-jurisdictional analysis. To be very clear, the subcommittee was no part of that. There's been no negotiation, there's been no discussion, there's been no support from the Legislative Assembly Office. The official opposition does not have access to any cross-jurisdictional analysis. So the government and the government caucus did a little work off the side of their desk and has decided that they should get more caucus money. Now, you have only used the terminology of 50% without explaining the financial impact and what this will cost to taxpayers and how much money this will give your caucus. Would you be prepared to share those numbers now?
Yeah, we sure can. If you just give me a moment, we'll have it submitted for the committee again. And by no means, MLA Gray, Christina, did I suggest that this was something that was performed by the subcommittee or the committee? Just for the record on that, I did not lead off with any of those comments. We did do this work off our desk, as you're suggesting, and it is to make sure that, quite frankly, I have the same horsepower that you do, so we can keep it fair for all Albertans, for the caucus work, and for our constituents and what takes place. So that's what the intent is, regardless of who may be sitting on which side of the aisle at the time. I think it is imperative that both caucuses, or if there's 2 or 3 or 4 or however that works out, that the MLAs have the ability to do their jobs outside of that very constrained government office when they're cabinet ministers. There's a lot of things there that still need to be taken care of as an MLA and as a member of that caucus.
Member Gray.
Thank you.
And then just after you respond, Christina, I do have member Sabir and member Egan on the list. I'll go to them, and then we can come back to you if you have it. You can go here, and then we'll come back to you if there's...
So I absolutely have additional comments right now because the caucus budget funding was last adjusted through a subcommittee process that took multiple months. That was, ironically, there was a subcommittee that was already looking at expense adjustments, and then MLA Jason Nixon added this to the context that the government is choosing to move this motion without providing any opportunity to explore this, to work with the LAO for both caucuses to get briefed on what this means is absolutely unprecedented and completely unfair. The last time these adjustments were made, the opposition and government caucus were in agreement, and I believe that that's how it should be. What Member Getson is putting forward, that this should be fair and that the two caucuses should have the same amount of money, is not how this works. That's not the expectation. The caucuses should receive the amount of money as per how the Alberta electorate has voted. How many MLAs do you have? And you and your caucus had 60 MLAs prior to the 2023 election. You lost 11 MLAs. You now have 49 MLAs. And if I am not mistaken, this move would give your caucus much more money than you had before. So the Alberta electorate said, no, you are going to have a smaller caucus. You did not have the support of the people. You got a smaller mandate, and now you think that your caucus should have more money. My napkin math just for the general per member funding, I didn't realize you were also including the research funding. This is at least a $1.1 million increase to your caucus budget. And that gives you a larger budget than you had as government last term. It is outrageous and does not make sense and does not match what came out of the last election. You're referring to it as being most reasonable, as doing the 50% of MLA contributions. When we did, again, because we had 48 hours notice, a quick review of what happens in other jurisdictions, the other jurisdiction that does 50% is BC. The 50% number we're talking about is $4,000, not over $50,000. So if you want to match BC, do a $4,000 top up, not $50,000. Trying to drive it by percentages completely distorts what's happening as far as this is concerned. The government has resources. Executive Council MLAs are getting a chief of staff, press secretaries, a car, a higher salary, the machineries of government to support them. Executive Council members do not do private members' bills. I have been a minister, Member Sabir has been a minister, Member Egan has been a minister. There are a number of resources taxpayers afford to the government, and that is a reason why they are excluded from the calculation for caucus budgets. So this, in my view, is an attempt by the government to double dip. And I just think the comment by Member Getson that this is not party specific when it is specifically advantaging the UCP today is ironic. So you are moving a motion to give your caucus more than $1 million, at a minimum a 25% increase. And I am very frustrated that this hasn't been done through a subcommittee process where at the very least we could explore the reasons for this, where we could explore the impacts. This is ridiculous.
Numbers back for a response.
On the numbers, sure. On this
throw me back on the speaking list.
On particular, this, if you want to provide the numbers, that's a fine and reasonable thing to do. I think it's fair that immediately following that we go to the two individuals who are on the list. So with respect to the numbers, please provide them.
Yeah, and then just to confirm, Chair, after the other two members precede me on the list, I would be following up. Okay, so currently, right now, what we get for caucus is $3,061,496. The opposition, which definitely gets more and utilizes their budget numbers, including to have their researchers drive out to remote communities, as an example of mine, to sit there for 2 hours on end and try to get a 15-second clip so they can bomb me on social media. What they get for that type of service and work to their constituents is $4.9 million, $4,920,473. So we have a difference essentially of $1.9 million currently that the NDP caucus can flex and do whatever they need to do for their service of their members.
Member Egan was first, followed by Member Sabir, and then Member Getson is back on the list, and there's a small chance that Member Gray will like to be on the list as well, I would expect. Member Egg.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think that Albertans are getting a very clear glimpse into how this UCP government really operates. And what we're seeing is a series of ways by which they can enrich themselves, enrich their caucus, and tilt the rules in their favor. If the UCP was so concerned about this, they should have thought about it, I would say, when they were building their very bloated cabinet. I mean, they've never seen such a big cabinet. Present members of this member services accepted. But otherwise, I mean, did they need to do that if they were thinking about caucus financing? I would beg to differ, and I think that clearly this is just another way to grab money, right? I know that their caucus does lots of political action in their caucus. They want to throw another $1 million, another 25% increase to their caucus, in addition to a bloated cabinet, quite frankly. And so I think, Albertans, this should raise eyebrows. It's an instructive moment to see how just self-serving this UCP government really is.
Member Sabir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of things. One, I would like to see that cross-jurisdictional report, if Member Getson would table that for the benefit of the committee. That would be great. Second thing is that Member Getson said that they are getting less money and opposition is getting more money. But as Member Egan said, that UCP chose to have a cabinet that's the biggest in the history of this province. And as if that was not enough, then they put parliamentary secretaries there. They also get some extra money, it's my understanding. And with each cabinet minister, you get chief of staff, you get deputy chief of staff, you get press secretary, you get a couple of MAs to do casework, you get schedulers, you get call takers, like you're taken care of. And insofar research needs are concerned, you're in government. You have government departments who have the data, who have the capacity to do that work. And I'm not sure what kind of work this $1 million+ will do for them. Because we have seen ads coming from UCP. He was talking about 30-second clip on social media. Ad coming against our leader, new leader, Nenshi, who's not even elected yet, and caucus money being spent, UCP caucus money being spent on those ads. So maybe Member Getson and the UCP caucus need to think and prioritize where they are spending their caucus money. And again, we've been in deliberation for a long time. We didn't hear anything on these lines, and now surprise us with this item without any kind of analysis, any kind of background information. UCP is just asking, give us more money. We got paid, we got housing allowance, we got golden parachute, we got gift rules changed, we got FOIP rule changed. Now you cannot know who they are meeting, who they are getting gifts from, and now give us another $1 million+ so that they can have a slush fund and use it as they see fit. So again, I would really appreciate if Member Getson can table the cross-jurisdictional analysis. I would be interested in seeing that.
For the benefit of the committee members, the list that I currently have is I had committed to Member Getson to be able to put him back on the list of providing, after he provided the additional information. I do have Member Gray again. I also have followed by Member Metz and Member Hunter, depending on, Christine, if you want to go straight to Dr. Metz, but okay. Member Getson to respond, followed by Dr. Metz and Mr. Hunter.
So we would commit to tabling the research that we did. Absolutely get that to there. To MLA Sabir's note, I'm not sure how you guys worked when you were in government, but I know as a parliamentary secretary, I get no bump. Essentially what that role is to do is to help the business of the day that's taking place. A number of our MLAs have different acumen, different skill sets that are being utilized in those areas, but there is no additional compensation. It's additional work, and it's good work for the people, but there is no compensation there. If this proposed change were elected by the subcommittee or move forward by the subcommittee, for the record, again, it's approximately $500,000 more that the opposition caucus would still have over the work that we need to do for that. To MLA Sabir's point on what we spend our caucus money on, I could make the commitment full well if you stop slamming my leaders and going after my members that I won't mention that your leader currently is not elected and is one of the best friends of Justin Trudeau and still supports the carbon tax. So if we want to start getting into that game of what we should do with our money and making people aware, I'm more than happy to have a sidebar conversation on how we spend that and what we do for those. But at current, it's not just the advertising that we do. It's not just that. It's a ton of the research that has to be done. It's a ton of the work that supports the MLAs. And this is intended to, regardless of which electoral cycle comes up, to try to make sure that there's a balance and not such a disparity. Again, we haven't seen this before. And again, I can't comment on how you guys ran it when you were in government, of what your lines between the ministries and where caucus blurred or didn't blur. But ours are pretty definitive, and this is intended to make sure that we get the best service for the MLAs and for the folks that voted Emir and who they represent. So with that, I'll just open up to the last remarks.
Dr. Metz, followed by Member Hunter and Member Gray.
Well, I think it's critically important that the UCP members recognize that the advantage they have in government is that all of the work around important issues to Albertans falls within some ministry. And they have huge benefits on the research, on the communication, on the supports around all of that work. Whereas in the opposition, all of the work that we do around anything, and I'll use healthcare as one example, has to be done by the caucus budget. So we don't get any support in our caucus for shadow ministries, shadow ministry work that's critically important. That all comes out of the caucus budget. So there is a huge disparity, but it's in the opposite direction of the way that they are presenting this today. And I would say, if you're going to be looking at evening things up, there should be more that would support the important work looking at what is happening in the different ministries by shadow ministers. I think they're going in absolutely the wrong direction.
Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, you can take me off. Jane Getson said what I wanted to say about parliamentary secretaries not getting any pay.
Okay. Member Gray.
Thank you. A couple of really important points have been made. And I want to repeat a couple, and I have a few new ones. First, Member Getson, the idea that the two caucuses should be funded equally, to be fair, is not how the caucus budget formula is supposed to work. The government lost 11 seats in the election, and yet for some reason you think your caucus budget should be higher today than it was when you had 60 MLAs. That doesn't make sense. That's not what Albertans would expect. And part of the reason that is happening is because with your 49 MLAs, you've made 25 of them ministers who get additional pay, who get a car, who get chief of staff, press secretary, multiple political staff in their offices, and the machinery of government supporting the work that they do in the government's agenda. And those resources do in turn benefit the caucus, as the caucus gets briefings on the bills that are happening and access to more detailed information than the official opposition does. So perhaps if the government is looking for more money, rather than going to the taxpayers and saying we should get an extra million plus, maybe closer to 2 million, again, I'm looking for the numbers when someone has them, perhaps instead of having 25 ministers here in Alberta, you should have 15, like Manitoba. And there would be 10 more. That would be almost $1 million additional caucus funding if you drop the cabinet size, without having to rejig the formula and to tilt the playing field in your own favor. Or you could copy BC, which has 16 ministers. But no, this government wants 25 ministers and wants their caucus to have this more money than when they had 60 MLAs. It is absolutely ridiculous. This caucus money that the government is looking to give themselves, really, we can consider it a bit of a slush fund. The member has already referred to the types of advertising that we've seen from the UCP caucus. I've got a document here with a good summary of all of the Nenshi attack ads that the UCP caucus has chosen to spend their money on. And so I'm very curious if the UCP caucus is looking for $1 million because they are terrified of Naheed Nenshi. And they want more money to advertise against him because that's what they've been using their money for up until now. They have serious priority issues at the moment. I also am very curious, and we've had no briefing from the LAO on this, but I always understood that the caucus funding formula excluding executive council was a continuation of the separation of powers between the legislative branch and the executive council. And we've had no conversations about that. Why is the funding formula this way? How has it been this way? Again, when we talk about BC, who does 50%, and who I believe the government is trying to copy, in BC we're talking about $2,000. Here in Alberta, you're talking about more than $50,000. So it's really no fair comparison whatsoever. Asking Albertans to give over $1 million, maybe closer to 2 million of additional funds to the UCP caucus with insufficient notice, insufficient research and debate in a process that we've never seen before. Right after, in the same meeting, you raised MLA salaries, you reintroduced golden parachutes, you increased constituency office budgets, and we learned not only did you give yourselves higher rent at 14%, but it was more than double what the independent consultant recommended. It's absolutely inappropriate, and it shows that the UCP members have lost the plot entirely. Your government is starving our public education and public healthcare systems of vital funds. Your premier is attending the inauguration of a foreign power who's threatening our very existence. And here you are taking more and more and more for yourselves. This is an absurd request. And I have been at committees like this one as an elected official for almost 10 years now. You should be read with embarrassment that you would even think to suggest this. This is more than 25% increase, allowing ministers to essentially double dip, increasing the size of a slush fund that you use to attack Naheed Nenshi, and all because you claim you're in a deficit position. The only reason you're in a deficit is because you haven't adjusted your spending to the fact that you lost 11 seats in the last election. This is how the funding formula is supposed to work. It is supposed to be commensurate with what the Alberta public has chosen for their legislature. And yes, we are the largest official opposition in the history of this province. That does not mean it is unfair to you.
Are there others wishing to provide additional comments, questions, or
Just one follow-up.
Member Getson?
Yeah, and MLA Gray, I have a ton of respect for you, and in my position, and put it on record, I think you should have been the leader of the official opposition, full and through. So $1.1 million to try to keep things that your caucus has a $500,000 upper hand is no by means of anything of us being scared of Naheed Nenshi. I mean, I recently had comments, and you talked about it, and you brought it up about the integration and the work that we do with the United States, our largest trading partner south of the border. We absolutely have seen a national gap that you can see with Trudeau falling on his own sword, sort of, and even stumbled at the podium with his own papers to do his exit swan dive. But your leader, again, didn't understand the significance of the border issues or the amount that fentanyl could kill people. So, no, not really scared of somebody who's unelected and doing that. Again, my arguments, we may disagree on how you look at this, and I can see why you're so adamant against this, because leveling the playing field is something, of course, that I think if I were in your position, I would be very scared of. We've managed to work with a deficit budget compared to what you've had for the last 2 years. We're doing that. But again, to do the work of the people, to make sure our MLAs are well represented, that is what we're looking for. And again, we're going to have differing opinions on that. But to suggest this is something we're looking at because we're scared of your unelected incoming leader, no, that's not the case at all.
Are there others? Member Gray?
Leveling the playing field, when you are the government and you have access to 25 ministers, all of the political staff that come with that, the machinery of government, the research, the work, the executive members don't do private members' bills, which the official opposition and other private members do. The premise you are putting forward that our two caucuses should have the same budget because the largest official opposition in Alberta's history has been elected does not make sense. And we have done no analysis on how this could impact future legislatures when the makeup of the legislature adjusts. You could be tilting the playing field permanently in favor of government caucuses forevermore. And I suspect that this is going to cost a lot of money. Again, we haven't heard the official numbers. Is it possible, does the LAO know, did the staff who support the work of this committee have any notice that this motion was coming? Do we have any information about what impact this might have to budgets?
Sure, Member Getson.
So again, specifically to the numbers, we currently are at 3061496.00. We are looking for an increase of 1161473.50. That would bring us to a value of 447298350. And at current, the NDP has 4920473, so $4.9 million, almost $5 million is what the NDP currently has at their disposal for caucus.
Can I just check in on that? Because when this was signaled that this might be coming 48 hours ago, I did 25 times half of the general funding per member, which is 46,452. And from that, I got 1.161, which is the number you just gave me. But your motion also includes research funding, which I think the research funding is particularly ridiculous given government ministers have access to their own departments. They do not do private members' bills. And that particular piece is additionally outrageous. But would that not also include an extra $10,000 per minister? So $10,000 times 25 on top of the numbers you've given me?
That's not the intent. So the intent is to take of what the value is. So real quick math on the back of the napkin here. Okay. Take the value of the MLA, divide that by half, and multiply by the ministers. That would be it.
Okay, but the math you've just given me does that only for general funding per member. It doesn't include research funding. And your motion includes both research funding and general per member funding. This is why we shouldn't be doing things like this, more than $1 million impact, spontaneously at committee without doing the background work. I don't think your math is right.
So we can compare, but this is, we'll go with the motion as written, because that's the intent, and the intent again was to have half of the value of the MLA's allocations, and then of course it goes to research funding. And that's capped at 1177391. So again, we would provide our items, our math, and our calculations all to the committee.
After the decision is made, which is ridiculous and completely frustrating and counter to how a government should be operating in every sense of the word, because here we are. I think your math is potentially wrong. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but you can't because we don't have anything in front of us. We've had no cross-jurisdictional information. We've had no briefings from the LAO, who is here to help support this. And this will impact the budget for the LAO and taxpayer dollars. At the same time, if I might add, so here we are, the government caucus is asking for $1 million. At the same time, legislative offices was just in front of their committee, and most of the legislative offices got cuts. They did not get the money they needed to fund the pressures they are under, to the tune of $500,000 here, $1 million there. At the same time, senior eye exams have been cut. De-indexing of Alberta seniors' benefits. Yesterday we heard the Calgary Disability Action Hall and the Edmonton Self-Advocacy Federation, self-advocacy groups for disabled Albertans have been cut. And I realize that that was a government decision, but the context is you have a government that is cutting things everywhere, and now you want to give your caucus more than 25% increase. This is ridiculous, self-serving, double-dipping, and creating a giant slush fund that gets used to attack Naheed Nenshi. The arguments that this is reasonable or mirrored off of other jurisdictions are patently false from the information that I've been able to find in the insufficient amount of time that we've been given. And the premise that the two caucuses should have the same budget is false. That's not how this is supposed to work. You get funding for the MLAs that you elect, and then executive council should be separate. You're changing the paradigm in a permanent way without us understanding the impacts, and it's only because the UCP caucus wants to have more money. This is the worst kind of decision making. This is self-serving to your caucus, and I am so frustrated that we don't even have the adequate information to know what the costs are going to be. So we've got bad numbers, bad reasoning, and a bad decision that's going to cost taxpayers.
Member Sabir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think Member Christina Gray mentioned that we are asked to make a decision without any information, without any analysis, without, I guess, numbers that what it means for taxpayers. And they relied on cross-jurisdictional analysis. I think that's a word gets used and abused very often. But I think I would ask government members if they would be willing to park this debate and bring back some independent analysis from LAO or the independent consultant, bring back the jurisdictional, interjurisdictional scan, and then talk about it with, I guess, more information and needed information. And if members of the UCP caucus are willing, I can move a motion to that effect as well.
As you know, Member Sabir, there's no motion requirement for any motion at the committee today, and that would include a motion to adjourn. If that's what you're proposing, you're well within your right to move such a motion, but of course that would be up to you, not to move the motion, not presumably up to members, other members of the committee as to whether or not you should do that.
So I will move to adjourn the committee.
Sorry, what you're moving to adjourn is this item under consideration, not to adjourn the meeting in its entirety, but provided that you're comfortable to do that, I mean, you're also welcome to do the other, but you would need to do this prior to the other, no matter what.
No, I will move first to adjourn the debate on this item until such time that we have some independent analysis, some numbers from LAO, and some interjurisdictional scan of this issue.
Oh, yeah, well, there's a motion on the floor, of course, but the member is well within his right to move to adjourn that item for consideration. And so, the honorable member, largely speaking, a motion to adjourn is a not debatable motion. And it's how it's handled inside the assembly, largely. So, the honorable member, Member Sabir, has moved to adjourn debate on this item for today's meeting. I will call the question here in the room. Anyone in favor, please say aye. Aye. In the room,
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No.
Joining us remotely, in favor, please say aye.
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 Joining us remotely, please say no.
No.
The noes have it. That motion is defeated. And we remain on the item before the assembly, which is the motion by Member Getson. Are there others wishing to join in the debate? Member Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the UCP seems really committed to giving themselves a more than 25% increase in the same day that they've given themselves a salary increase, golden parachute, more constituency money. They've already increased their temporary accommodation allowance, giving themselves higher rent. But on this particular item, again, I note, you are giving yourselves a higher caucus budget now than when you had 60 MLAs in the last legislature. That makes no sense. That shouldn't be how that works. And we don't have the appropriate math calculations, cross-jurisdiction information. So to the UCP members of this committee, this decision-making process is completely broken. You don't have the best information going forward. This should be defeated, and I would encourage all members to vote against the motion that is before the committee.
Honorable members, are there others wishing to speak to the motion as proposed by Member Getson? Seeing none, I am prepared to call the question. Honorable members, here in the room, those in favor of the motion as proposed by Member Getson, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. And joining us remotely, those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, please say no.
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 That motion is carried, and a recorded division has been requested by Member Gray, and we will conduct this division in the way that we have done throughout the meeting. All those in favor here in the room of the motion as proposed by Member Getson, please raise your hand. Member Getson, Member Roswell, Member Long. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Member Gray. I will call each of you on the phone individually. Please indicate in favor or opposed. Member Weeb.
In favor.
Member Hunter.
Aye.
Member Sabir.
Against.
Dr. Metz.
Against.
Member Egan.
Opposed.
Mr. Speaker, total for the motion 5, total against 4.
That motion is carried and so ordered. This brings us, are there any other items under other business? I don't believe that there was. This brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. I will just note that as the committee has now approved a change to the caucus budget funding formula, the 2025-2026 budget parameters document will also need to indicate this. It will be included in the other decisions that the committee has undertaken, and will be circulated. My expectation of administration would be that it would be early to middle of next week for us to see that new budget parameters document. Item number 7 is the date of the next meeting, which will be at the call of the chair. I anticipate that we will require a budget meeting in the not too distant future, and I hope to be able to approve any changes to the orders as a result of today's meeting as well. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Member Sabir.
So moved.
Honorable members, all in favor of the motion as proposed by Member Sabir, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. Joining us remotely, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered, and the meeting is adjourned.